Hello all, Franklin Ruff here, and today this video is going to talk about SJs and deepness. And the reason that I decided to make this video is because I read so often on forums how intuitives look at how we as SJs or sensors in general, including SPs, see the world, and basically the word that you use is that we are shallow and that we don't have the ability to hold those deep conversations. And I'm going to disagree with that assertion of us being shallow and explain from the SJ perspective, specifically the ISTJ perspective, what deepness is to us. Now, first, let's just talk about intuitive sensor interactions. And the thing about intuitives is that you all have a wide breadth of things that you're interested in. So you could be talking about origin of the universe 1 minute, and that could lead to a conversation about physics, which could lead to a conversation about world hunger, which could lead to a conversation about fishing in the Indian Ocean. And you have a genuine interest in discussing those subjects. Also, depending on the type of intuitive that you are, some intuitives just get a joy out of debate. Now, that is not the case with many sensors. And now that does not mean that we cannot have a deep conversation. We are going to have deep conversations about the things that we are interested in, one. And two, we are action-oriented in our personalities. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you're talking about something that strikes our fancy, that we're interested in, we can get really deep and really down into that conversation and talk about it and have an enjoyable and deep interaction back and forth. But it has to be something that strikes our interest. Now, as an intuitive, you can be talking about that and then you move on to something else, and generally we're going to be polite, but we're not going to, that conversation for us is not going to go past a surface level simply because we're not interested. I'll give you an example. I have interests. My interests are theology. My interests are preaching, leadership, education. And so if we're talking about those things, if you want to talk, for instance, about the origin of the universe, we can get into a deep conversation about that. Just understand that my perspective in that conversation about the origin of the universe is going to be a theological perspective. And that's how we're going to have that conversation. If you want to talk about leadership and the importance of leadership and the qualities of a leader, we can get into a deep conversation about that. You want to talk about quantum physics, you want to talk about whether Pluto is a planet or not, I'll listen, but I don't have any interest in that. Now, another thing to take into consideration with sensors is that we are people of action. And so let's say you're talking to us about world hunger and how there are hungry people in the Sudan right now, or hungry people in Central Africa, or hungry people in Central Asia. We may seem as if, as you're talking about this, we don't care and we're uninterested, but although we may never say it, what is going through our minds as you are talking about this issue, even though it may be an issue that's important to us, is what are you going to do about it? That's what we're thinking. You're talking about this hunger crisis. But what are you going to do about it? Because remember, as sensors, we are people of action. So what we're looking at is, okay, what can I do to help to deal with this problem? I don't want to talk about it. I want to take action to try and to fix it. And if it's not a problem on a grand scale that we think we can fix, because let's just face it, world hunger is not a one-person problem. That's a problem that is going to take many people, and it's going to take government entities. So what we will do is we will say, okay, what can I do as an individual to help that problem? And for me, I'm not going to say that I'm not interested in world hunger, but for me, dealing with that is dealing with hunger in my community. And we do have that here. And so I'm going to do things within my community. Again, it's not that I'm not interested in the subject that you're talking about, but my thought process is, okay, yeah, you're talking about this, but what are you going to do about it? Okay, yeah, that's great. And another thing is that you have to understand that sometimes there are things that you may be passionate about that we just don't have that passion. And one of those, and I'll just use an NF friend of mine who is a vegetarian. And I mean true vegetarian, no meat products whatsoever. He doesn't do the fish, he doesn't do the eggs and any of that. I am not. And he tries to talk to me about these ethical issues about the reason why he's a vegetarian. Now, I now live in cattle raising country. So one day I just decided, you know, let me find out how much of this is that he's talking about is actually true. And so I went and looked into it, went to visit several different cattle farms, went to visit several different meatpacking plants, and although it's just not the nicest looking operation, the things that he was talking about happening were not happening in these facilities. Now, do they happen, the things that he was talking about? Yes, they do, but they generally happen in non-American facilities because American facilities are so highly regulated. And so when he gets to talking to me about the reason why he's a vegetarian and why I should become a vegetarian, I listen to him politely, and we have a very surface conversation because, again, I don't care. You're doing what you want to do, and I'm not going to do it. So let's just get over it. So basically, when it comes to deepness, the things I want my intuitive friends to understand is that we as sensors are not shallow. It's just the two things that you need to consider when you want to hold a deep conversation with us. First, it needs to be something that we find interesting. So, find out what your sensor friends find interesting. I'm pretty sure you'll find them interesting as well, because as intuitives, you generally have a wider range of interest. And so when you want to hold that deep conversation, find something that they're interested in. And you might have to go against your nature a little bit if you want to continue that conversation, in that you can't go from point A to point D, because we as sensors go A, B, C, and D. And the transitions need to make sense for us. So you can't go from origins of the universe to world hunger, because we're like, why would you even connect those two? The next thing is, if you're talking about some important issue that is affecting people, and one, we're going to know that we're thinking, one, what is the solution? And two, what are you going to do about it beyond just talking? Old saying, talk is cheap, was probably a sensor that came up with that. So, no, we're not shallow, and we do have the ability to be deep, and that's basically all I have to say on the subject. Welcome your comments, and feel free to disagree. That's the origin of good discussion, is to just be able to talk about things. Sometimes we'll agree, sometimes we'll disagree, but as a sensor, I can simply tell you, we do have the ability to be deep, and no, we are not shallow. Are there some people who are shallow? Yes, but that is not something that's just sensors. There's some pretty shallow intuitives as well. So that's where we're at with it. talking about SJs and deepness. Welcome your comments.